Hello, it's Friday afternoon, 1st of May. Shabbat is about to start very soon, but I would like to record this week's Torah portion blog, which I am doing every week, and I hope it brings somebody some level of understanding and maybe gets you thinking about what I am saying, at least. So this week we're learning Parsha Acharei Mot Kedoshim. Acharei Mot translation is after the death of. And the Parsha begins by telling us that God spoke to Moses after the death of two sons of Aaron, when they came near before God and died. God warns against unauthorized entry into the holy, and into the Holy of Holies, obviously. Only one person, the Kohen Gadol, high priest, may enter the Holy of Holies once a year on Yom Kippur. He can enter the innermost chamber of the sanctuary to offer the secret ketoret, incense, to God. And basically to have a sort of level of connection to the spiritual power of Hashem. Another feature of the Day of Atonement service was the casting of the lots over the two goats to determine which should be offered to God as a sacrifice and which should be dispatched to the desert to carry off the sins of children of Israel, and eventually he gets killed, he gets thrown from a top mountain. The Parsha of Acharei also warns against bringing karbanot sacrifices, animal or meal offerings, anywhere else except the holy temple, forbids consumption of blood, and details the laws prohibiting incest and other deviant sexual relations. The second part of the Torah portion, this week portion, Kedoshim, it begins with a statement. You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. This is a commandment to Jewish people. This is followed by dozens of mitzvot, divine commandments, through which the Jew sanctifies him or herself and relates to the holiness of God. These include prohibition against idolatry, the mitzvah of charity, the principle of equality before the law, of the powerful and less powerful, of the poor and the rich, the laws of Shabbat, sexual morality, honesty in business, honor and awe of one's parents, respect to one's parents, and the sacredness of life. It includes as well simple statements like you don't put an obstacle in front of a blind man. And we will come to that in a few seconds. Also in Kedoshim is the principle, which the great sage Rabbi Akiva called a cardinal principle of Torah, and of which Hillel said, love your fellow as yourself. This is the entire Torah, and the rest is commentary. As you can see, there are many very important issues raised in that Parsha, and this is a very important Parsha because we read it on Yom Kippur, as well as during the course of the year, but for a number of reasons. Because I'm constantly thinking of how the society should change after all this pandemic which we experience now. I think this subtle statement of do not put an obstacle in front of a blind person, it's very important. The Torah says you shall not place a stumbling block in front of a blind person, and you shall have fear of God. I am the God, and it's stated in Leviticus 14. Would any of us really place an obstacle that a blind person could trip over? I don't think so. Very few people would have such low morals as to transgress this Torah commandment according to the most literal, simple interpretation of what it really means. Mankind in general has the basic moral fiber not to want to harm a blind man or disabled person for no reason. So, what does it really mean? Let's look at it together. I think all of our society in relation to this Torah statement are the victims as well as the perpetrators of this sin, the sinners. And why I'm saying that? Let's try to look at it together. I would like to focus on this issue of not placing a stumbling block. The contemporary society today contains within it a severe and far-reaching stumbling block, which has led to the abuse of the environment by endangering the earth, delicate ecosystem, and limited natural resources. What has happened actually? At the turn of the 20th century, particularly after the Great Depression, the general population was too frugal, very, very careful with their money, and poor to purchase any material goods in significant quantities from the overproduction capabilities of the consequences of industrial revolution. So, to overcome this, what has been required basically is a change in the spiritual and intellectual values of the people, of the whole society, from the emphasis on values like thrift, modesty, moderation, towards a value system that encourages spending and ostentatious display of wealth. So, and because of this, in the United States, they found a solution, which was the strategy of consumerism. The creation of a public mindset that encourages overconsumption beyond people's actual needs. Consumerism equates personal happiness with purchasing and consuming material possessions. Let's face it, it's a blatant truth. The business and governments who stood to gain from this increased trade, essentially blinded the people into believing that happiness could be achieved through endless consumption. And that was promoted from cradle to grave. You don't believe me? Well, advertising aggressively shaped consumer desires and created value in commodities by associating them with the power to transform the consumer into a more desirable person. Luxuries became necessities because you got to look the part. In 1880, only $30 million was invested in advertising in the United States. Today, the figure has climbed to over $120 billion of pure advertising and marketing. The concept of fashion helped to create anxiety and restlessness over the possession of items that were new or up to date. You know what I'm talking about. I must have this latest mobile phone, otherwise I cannot function properly. Which we know very well, it's not true. It's obviously our mindset and our little desires. In addition to the rise of advertising techniques, workers were given higher wages to increase their buying power in order to create a consumer economy. It was all deliberately done in the United States. The advent of the credit card in the 1950s went even further. It enabled people to buy things on credit that they would not normally consider purchasing. Originally meant to stimulate economic growth, credit shopping actually leads to increased consumption and consumer debt. The US Department of Commerce, created in 1921, serves to illustrate actually the role of the federal government in the promotion of consumption. The Commerce Department encourages maximum consumption of commodities, producing films and leaflets advocating higher levels of consumption. As a consequence of all this, a great many of our environmental concerns are caused by the subtle but potentially lethal stumbling block of consumerism. Yes, we are victims and perpetrators. Consumerism has brought about many of the environmental crises which the world is facing today, such as global warming by increasing the burning of fossil fuels, species extinction because of the clearing of the forests, the proliferation of landfills and subsequent contamination of water from the residues of the chemicals used in production of different products, of more material goods. Our society conditions us to equate personal happiness with the consumption of material goods. We are fighting an endless battle to minimize the environmental damage caused by the overproduction and subsequent disposal of consumer goods which we really do not need. Today we find ourselves simultaneously the victims and the culprits of the commandment not to place stumbling block before the blind man. The consumer is blinded almost from birth by the advertising and the resulting need to consume, so that we no longer know what we really need. We really constantly searching to find ways to sell products in order to accumulate enough wealth to purchase other people's products. Think about the stupidity of all this. Because we have been blinded into thinking that we need them, those little products, other products, to be happy. We need to learn to produce, sell, and consume fewer unnecessary products whose waste fills the landfills around the world. Whether we produce, market, sell, or encourage the latest mobile phone or other electronic gadget, or ostentatious simcha, or super luxury home, or late model supercar, or 99-cent toys that will break in the next day, we should consider what we are really doing. And is it really ethical? We should ask ourselves a simple set of questions. Do I need this thing? Question 1. Why do I need it? Question 2. And how long it will last to function as I expected? Question 3. And if the answer to the first question, I don't need it, really, then don't buy. And if the answer to the second question, I need it to impress others, not because I really desperately need it, but simply to impress with the label, with the higher price of my super luxury product, don't buy. And if the answer to the third question, it's cheap garbage which will last for 5 minutes, don't buy. And then, maybe after this calamity, this pandemic which we're experiencing right now, we may find a different world if we will learn to be cold-minded and think ourselves about what we buy, what we consume. Shabbat Shalom.